This is Let's Talk Business with your hosts, Marc Ebinger and Heather Boehm. Now, here's Marc.
Welcome to Let's Talk Business, a show that talks entrepreneurship with some of the best businesses in the San Antonio area. Coming up on the show today, we're going to talk with Skylar Moon, an investor, entrepreneur, and the owner of DZީR Night Club here in San Antonio. Skylar, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I like the unique way you spelled your nightclub name.
It definitely gets the attention online. People are, when we first launched, trying to figure out how does it pronounce, what is it? Some people thought it may be like an adult club, and other people thought it, was just some kind of bar. So it was a really good way to really launch and get the attention driven around it.
Yeah, and you put the little line above the eye on it too.
Makes it look
Slick,
exotic, yeah.
We're also going to talk with Guillermo Garza, the owner of Guillermo's Restaurant here in San Antonio. Guillermo, welcome to the show.
Thanks for blah, blah, blah. I'm glad to be here, Marc. Thanks for having me on. And I'd like to note, even though I'm very proud of my last name, Garza, I'm like kind of Madonna. I just go by Guillermo.
Guillermo. Got it. In studio with us today is Heather Boehm, a certified business coach that works with business owners to gain clarity and achieve their goals. Heather, welcome to the show.
Always good to be here. I'm excited about today.
And I am your host, Marc Ebinger, the owner of Crükus Marketing Agency, a company that specializes in giving small businesses a competitive edge by hiring administrative and social media experts from the Philippines. Something I did that, 11 months now that I've been using VA. So I started in August, and I built my business from basically nothing. I'm up to almost $250,000 in sales now.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, so we're growing pretty fast. It's all about leverage. It's something that I learned to do very early on, so I didn't get trapped in a job.
Yeah.
There's no way you could run 4 businesses without leveraging.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
work on the business and not in it every day.
Exactly. I'm excited to talk with you about some of that stuff, too. So a quick reminder for our listeners, you can catch video and podcast versions of the show anytime by visiting our website at satalkradio.com. And if you're a business owner in the San Antonio area and would like to have your company featured on the show, visit our website at satalkradio.com or call our office at 210-960-8210. That's 210-960-8210, and we can get you booked on the show. So you guys go to coffee shops, right?
Every day.
Sure.
Every day, right?
100%, yeah.
So they have the little tip thing that they turn around, right? When you're going to pay, and they
Yep.
turn around and says, would you like to leave a tip? It starts at 10%, 15, 20% or whatever. And I started thinking about this, and I'm seeing it all over the place.
Yeah.
And even in drive-thrus and restaurants like Whataburger and stuff, they're asking if you want to round up. Taco Bell, same thing, round up. I hit a few fast food places.
Well, those, I feel like with the fast foods, isn't that usually for charity on
Yeah,
those
it's
ones?
round up.
Yeah, it's round up for charity, and then I have to feel like a monster when I'm like, no.
Right?
The
You
kids'
feel like
foods are
you're taking
"Ah."
from children.
Yes.
South Park
No,
did a
for sure.
funny cartoon where the guy was going through the line,
seen it, yeah.
and he was like, yeah, that's hilarious. But so Skylar, what are your thoughts on this whole
So,
tipflation thing, as they're calling it?
I mean, there's definitely a lot of social pressure around it, right? I mean, you feel it anytime you go anywhere. Even in the drive-thru at Starbucks, they've got the little credit card machine, and it automatically asks you 1, 2, or 3 on there, and so you kind of feel obligated. I mean, we've used it on our side of the business, and it's good for the employee, the one that's there making the tip. But I think that people are more so on the employee side. They're more kind of expecting it now, right? So back 10, 15, 20 years ago, a tip was you go above and beyond, you do the service, you provide exceptional service, and then you're awarded, a tip. And now I feel like everybody's just in a state of complacency. And, I don't have to do anything above and beyond. Let me just do the bare minimum, and now I'm expected. I'm going to make that extra 20% or that extra 10%. So I think that's more the problem around it. I don't mind tipping, big whenever there's good service and there's, service provided at, a higher level than normal. But I don't know if it's something that, business owners are now just trying to cut their cost and really pushing that hourly rate onto the to the customer. But it is definitely an interesting subject.
And Guillermo, you run restaurants, so how's it over there in the restaurant world?
So in the restaurant business, we depend on tips, and I'm okay with it. It's the way we've evolved. It's the way the industry has been. It's the way it's been designed. Now, going everywhere, there's a lot of questions we can ask on why it's happening. The first thing I do is when I'm presented in the case where I'm being asked to tip in a manner I've typically not have to tip. I've been around for a little while. Just real quickly, just observe it. Wait a minute here. Now, I just spent $15 on one overpriced drink.
Yeah.
20% of that
Yeah.
is what, $3? Do I need to tip that much? No, I'll tip $1, right? I typically tip $1 per drink, or maybe $1.50 per drink. And with food, it's flat out 20%. And then I can ask the question, well, the car wash guy is asking me to leave a tip.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Now, whose fault is this? And I do believe we'll eventually hit homeostasis where it'll balance out.
Sure.
But what about these companies like Square and Toast? Maybe that's a selling point to them, saying, "Hey, listen, vendor, we can offer you tips really easy, and your staff is going to love it." So tipflation, I'm not sure if that was an organic demand that was coming from employees. It may have been part of a marketing tool, which it's so easy to turn around and say, this cup of coffee costs $7. You got 2 cups, $14. Would you like to leave more than 25% tip?
Well, because the credit card companies take their percentage off the top of gross. They don't say, oh, tip minus in cash, and then I'm going to charge the customer on the rest of it. My big thing with the tipflation is I understand the service industry. You serve me at the end of the service, I then provide a tip. And yes, even when the service is terrible, I tip, especially in a restaurant setting, because that is how they make their income. But at coffee shops, at the car wash, the tip is asked for before I even get my product.
Yep.
So for me, I'm like, are they going to do a bad job if I don't tip?
Yeah.
And ew.
It's part of that pressure, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, social pressure around it. When they turn that screen around and it's facing you, people are watching you. I'm going to click no tip and sign it or whatever. It's like, oh, you're that guy, right? I was like, come on. I'm just coming here for a cup of coffee and I want to just move on my day.
I've simply asked him, I said, check this. Is there a mirror behind me? I said, if I don't tip you, what happens?
Oh, there you go.
Oh, gosh.
Just ask the question.
They're like, we're gonna
Okay,
spit in your drink.
okay, I'll leave him a tip, but say no tip. But yeah, those are the pressures that these companies, and it's not hard to figure out.
No, it's entrepreneurship too, right? I mean, there's also more money to be made there. You can make your employees more money.
Sure.
I don't really know how the tip industry works when, behind the scenes and where that money really goes and what if the company's keeping any. I don't really know any of that stuff, and that's a longer discussion somewhere else. But it is an opportunity to generate more revenue for your employees. I get it. Why would you turn away from it when it's becoming more and more socially acceptable? Because it's everywhere.
Well, we've got a really good example. So whenever you come into the nightclub, typically there's a cover charge, right? And so there's a girl or somebody at the front door who's charging that charge to get everybody in. And so her job is mainly tipped as well. She does get a salary, obviously, but then there's, a tip portion to it. And so before, we would have her just, either ask for the tip or it'd be on the line. But it was very kind of subtle. And so she was making okay money, but it wasn't anything crazy. Well, then when we got into the swivel where it's turned around and they're then pressured in front of a line, when you got a line of customers waiting to get in, everybody's looking at you, right? Plus, you got a good-looking girl at the front door. You don't want to look like the one guy that's not tipping. I mean, I think her tips went up probably 4x from one day to the next, and then we just kept that practice. And, I mean, it's
just
insane.
entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
What we see as well is there's almost a shift of liability in terms of service now being responsible with being provided. So a great question we could ask is, hey, over the past 50 years, even with the last 5 years, as we've seen this tipflation, has service improved?
No. I think it's gone down. Yeah, for sure.
Because it's expected now.
Yeah, we're like a bunch of little brats. When we want our money, we don't want to have to work for it. I mean, I'm not speaking for everybody, obviously, but I mean, as a society, it seems like it's okay to act like that.
Well, on the restaurant industry, from the service side, simply put, if you do not give them a good service, human nature is, I don't care what the kitchen or if the ambiance, or if I'm sorry, let me repeat that. The issue I may have with the kitchen, the server is going to pay the price, zero tip.
Yeah.
So, the advice I would have for any one of us is spend 5 minutes to figure out your tip rules. My tip rules are $1 per drink. And if I feel like it's great or I've had one too many, maybe $1.50 or $2.
And I don't want to go on too much of a rabbit trail, but there's also the thing about people are starting to charge folks like at restaurants for that credit card fee.
Oh yeah.
They're like, if this is the price at cash and this is a price. So that's another way that inflation is hitting us.
Yeah.
You know, we got tipflation, right? We got regular inflation, and then we got this subtle inflation that's happening elsewhere. So it's just something to kind of keep an eye on when we talk about rising costs of everything going up. So, all right. Well, let's get into it. Skylar, first up on the show is Skylar Moon, an investor, entrepreneur, and owner of DZީR Night Club here in San Antonio. Skylar, I'm excited to have you on the show. You even dress nice.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. So you have got quite the entrepreneurial kind of background here. So you launched 42 Boost mobile locations, right? That's back when we'll get into that, into the cellular industry. Sales over $20+ million a year, which is amazing. I thought I was doing good at $250,000, right? I was all, I'm $250,000 now, and $20+ million a year. You bought a failing nightclub during COVID and 10x sales, and then you discovered a tax hack through the laundry business. And I definitely want to get into that. I always like tax advantages, you know. So tell me a little bit about your backstory. How did you get involved in sales? Where did this all start? Let's move through it fairly quickly so we don't.
Yeah, I'll give you the quick 5-minute rundown.
Sure.
So when I was younger, I actually moved out of my house around 15 years old. And so everything, was fine at home. Just I was very stubborn, and you know how it is when you're a teenager and you think you know what you want and what you're gonna do, and parents have a different idea for you. So anyways, did that, and you got to hustle. At some point, you got to be able to pay your own bills, and so I made up my mind that's what I was gonna do. And so finished out high school, didn't go to college, but started mowing lawns and just doing odds and end jobs, trying to make ends meet. Ended up running over my cell phone with the lawnmower, and then that's how I got into the cell phone business. So I ended up meeting a guy that owned a Crükus store at the time.
What year is this?
Wire. This is 2008.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a while back. And so met a guy who had his own shop, and he sold me a phone. And then I just got real interested in that business and saying, man, I mean, if you can make, $15, $20, because I was buying phones off eBay and going to sell them to them. So I'd buy a phone for $90, sell for $120 or $130 or whatever. And I'm like, well, shoot. If I could figure out how to do this more often, I wouldn't have to be outside, burning up, mowing lawns, making $20, $30, right? It's the same profit margin, but way less effort and a lot more scalable, right? So I'm thinking, man, I got to figure this thing out. So I started working on that, figured that out, ended up opening up my first store right out of high school off of Walls and Montgomery Road, right where the HEB's at over there.
Okay.
And got really lucky on it. I mean, it just seemed like it was meant to be. I don't know if you know much about commercial leasing. I know you know a lot about commercial leasing. For an 18-year-old that has no credit and no money and has no experience and, basically doesn't offer anything, just trying to put something together, it's really hard to get a commercial lease. Well, he ended up giving me, a sweetheart deal. Gave me a couple months free rent because the place was pretty shoddy and needed some work to be done to it. So put some money on some credit cards, built up, went to Home Depot, bought, all the materials we needed, and basically built a store, me and a buddy of mine, and started off doing used phones, just selling used phones. We'd buy them, kind of like used car business. We'd trade them in whenever the new phone was ready. Because at that point in 2009, 2010, cell phones were pretty, other than the flip phones, smartphones were really new. I mean, if you think about it, iPhone barely got launched in 2008. So I'm right in that kind of era where people were starting to really look into trading in their flip phones and getting into a smartphone, right? And so I took advantage of that wave. And did that business for a while. Somehow one of the Boost representatives ended up coming into my store because my store wasn't like a branded retail store. It was just,
What was the name of it?
Moon Mobile. Yeah, so last name's Moon, right? So Moon Mobile. It's kind of catchy, 90% of the business was driven through Craigslist at the time. That's back in the good old Craigslist days. Again, there was no Facebook Marketplace. There was, eBay was, it was around still, but it wasn't the hottest thing anymore. So Craigslist drove a lot of our business, and had got our walk-ins that way. So then somehow one of the Boost representatives heard about our location, walked in and said, hey, do you want to start selling Boost? I had never heard of it, didn't know what it was. I was like, well, what is this? What's your prop? What are you trying to sell me? And he said, we get branded phones, warranties. You don't have to worry about dealing with phones that are broken all the time. They're brand new. And then you make, I think it was like at the time, like 25% of whatever the customer's monthly payment was. So a customer comes in and pays $100 for the bill, you keep $25. I was like,
and now you're talking recurring revenue.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I said, sign me up. So I signed up with them, and after a year.
What would you make on a sale of a phone?
So the phones weren't much. It's about $25. So
okay. And then you're getting $20, $25
on the recharge, depending on how much their monthly bill was.
Sweet, man.
Yeah, it was a good deal back then. It was a really good deal. And so I ran with that. So I was still doing, at that point, it was what they would call like a multi-carrier phone. So you had, or a phone store, you would have, their brand, plus you were still selling, other products and stuff.
Sure.
So after about a year, they said, hey, we want you to come exclusive with us. And I said, well, I'm making a lot of money kind of with other products too. So I promised them a secondary location. So I did a second location off of Babcock and 410. And then I ended up doing another one off of Nacogdoches. Anyways, from there, it just grew on and on and on. And
was
really,
it a good move going with them as like?
Yeah, so my thing with that is in the business that I was in the repair business and the used phone business, you are the guy driving the business, right? You're doing the repairs yourself. You're doing the, evaluating if this phone is worth so much on trade-in, how much you can retail it for. And so you're really stuck working in the business, as we mentioned earlier, right? And so I always wanted to look, ahead and how can I scale and how can I get bigger? I've always had pretty big ambitions and wanted to, didn't really know where I was going to go, but I knew that I wanted to, be involved in business and have business and be able to scale it and make it bigger.
Nice.
And so with the retail model with Boost, it's something you can copy and paste. It wasn't a franchise model. They called it like an authorized retailer, but it's basically a franchise. They give you a contract and say, hey, the store needs to look like this, feel like this. Here's the hours you have to operate, blah, blah, blah. So, it's basically a franchise. And so with that, there's enough structure that you can copy and paste and move on. Whereas with the original business that was repairing phones, you teach somebody how to do it, and then they're making you, 300% margin, and they're just getting paid an hourly rate or a commission or whatever. They're basically they want to go off and do it on their own. And so it's really hard to copy and paste that model.
You were killing it though at the cell phone game.
Oh, yeah.
You'd open multiple locations. You're making higher margins. And now if we look at today, you're in a wildly different place. You own different types of businesses that don't seem to have anything to do with each other. So what was that transition?
So I was stuck in the phone business for about a decade. And as the years went on and more people had, there was saturation in the market, more people had cell phones. Everybody's got a phone, from your 6-year-old, to the elderly folks. Everybody's got a phone. So there's really no new customers out there, right? So at this point in the wireless industry, it's just, how do we get people to switch back and forth? So it's a really not a very profitable business for the retailer anymore. For the carrier, they've still got the recurring revenue every month. But for a retailer who's having to bring in new business every month, it is extremely difficult. So they've also crunched our margins. So I said all that, and then by the time COVID comes, I'm looking at this thing. I've always tried to have a at least 5-year outlook, what's coming up in the future. And you can kind of just see, being in retail, having 40 some odd stores with COVID being around is probably not a great idea, right? It's probably not something you want to get stuck in. And so I had some early intuition, and I got lucky, found a guy out of Houston, bought about 65% of that business. And then I just really took some time off. I had worked for about a decade, just all day, every day, didn't really take much time off, was building that business. Like I never really raised money from any private investors, from banks, never took a bank loan until after 10 years of being in business. And so every store we opened was just from profits that were coming from the original stores and turning those over. And so I worked a lot. And so I took about a year off and just trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And so we were obviously in the middle of COVID as well, right? And so, again, thinking in the future, what's probably struggling right now? What's a business that's struggling that I can get into? Because I made a pretty good exit, so I had some cash I was sitting on, playing with the market. Obviously, the market did some fun things during COVID. It dipped a lot, and then I took a lot of that and, was able to turn that around. So I had some good successes, even while being, off work. So just looking, we thought restaurants, but they didn't really want to get in the restaurant space. I know it's a hard space, and I wasn't, I'd already worked a lot. I didn't want to go right back into something like that. And so just really took our time to think about something. Originally, it was a bar. Let's do a bar, right? And so I was looking at doing that. And then one thing led to the next. I know some people in the nightlife business, and they ended up hooking me up with, it was Lush Rooftop was the name of the club that I ended up buying. Been there for, 6 or 7 years or so, and got hooked up with the owner. And sure enough, COVID kind of did them in. You got really expensive rent. You got a lot of overhead, and you just couldn't open at the time, right? Or you could minimally open. And so took that opportunity, made the purchase. I kind of knew what I wanted to do with it. As soon as we bought it, closed it down, rebranded it, renamed it. We had a vision of being kind of like a Vegas-style nightclub as far as the production and whatnot goes. So we invested a lot into like the lighting and the sound equipment, more so than what most other clubs here in town do. And so that was the vision we had. And, I didn't know what I was doing. I just said, I'm going to go after it. And one thing I've done really well in my career is surround myself with the right people, right?
There you go.
And so you need a really good bar manager, somebody who's been around forever and knows what they're doing, especially since I don't know what I'm doing in that industry. You needed a good light and sound production guy because that was kind of the draw of the club. Obviously I don't know anything about that. And so you just put the right people in place, and I had a lot of good advisors and people around me, and we executed really well, and it ended up turning out amazing.
How are you finding these people?
So there's a bunch of different avenues, right? A lot of it is, as you get bigger in business and people kind of know about you, people want to be on your team, right? So that's one thing about, one, treating people well. It's just the basic stuff that you should do. Treat people well, pay them right, pay them on time, treat them like humans, be friends with them rather than just, a dictator to them, right? So that's one way to do it, is being somebody that people want to work for, right? And then you've got your traditional tools. You've got Indeed and and stuff like that. So it's a combination of both. A lot of word of mouth, a lot of people just know who I am now at this point. And so if I ever need to hire somebody, I can just put a real quick Instagram post, hey, looking to hire this position, and I'll get just tons of DMs from, friends and family, just people who follow me, people I don't even know, hey, hit up this guy. That's how we found one of our chefs at the restaurant we just opened, same type deal. We jumped into the restaurant space, had no idea what we were doing there, but, did our research on the back end, kind of figured out, okay, these are the key people we need in place, here's what you need to do. And so, we did some of the traditional hiring through Indeed. Once you get 1 or 2 employees, typically in an industry, so if it's the bar industry or whether it's, the car lot industry, whatever it is, typically people know each other, right? So again, if you're a nice guy and you're fun to work for and you offer good pay and good benefits, typically, people know each other in that industry. So once you get your foot in an industry, typically, if you're doing the right things, you can pretty easily attract talent.
So tell me about the laundry business and why did you do that?
Yeah. So laundry is fun. So I was in the nightclub business, and obviously, you start flowing a lot of cash. Well, then with that is the burden of having to pay a lot of tax, to the government at the end of the year. And so I started just researching strategies online, and I found an online business influencer who was talking about laundromats. And the reason he did it was for the same reason. He had a big Airbnb business flowing a bunch of cash, but needed to figure out a way to mitigate some of those taxes. And so the laundry business. So with the laundry business, my 3 favorite things in it: 1, it's a really easy business to run. There's not a ton of employees, right? You've got a couple people on site and maybe 1 manager per location. So it's not rocket science. There's not a whole lot of stuff that can go wrong other than, maybe the clothes doesn't get dried fast enough or gets bleached or whatever. But it's not anything major. Like in the cell phone industry, it's all day, towers are down. There's, payment issues or whatever, right? So it's a really easy business to run. Number 2 is it flows cash pretty well, and it's pretty consistent. So it's not going to be something to where it's not super seasonal. It's pretty consistent throughout the year. People are always washing their clothes. It's a business that's been around forever, and so it doesn't really seem like it's going away, especially if you've got a good location around apartment complexes or places that don't typically have, their own washer and dryer. And then there's other ways to pick up the business. We're now doing like wash and fold where people come and drop off. We're offering a service. We'll come to your house. You want to leave a bag on your front porch, so kind of like a DoorDash deal. You want to get on demand, your clothes clean. You don't want to do it, for $50, $100, depending on how much laundry you have. We'll come out once a week to your house, pick it up, wash it, fold it, have it in an airtight bag, then send it right back to your house. And so basically that chore is knocked out for you, right? So that's one way you can grow it as well. And then my third favorite reason, the reason I got into the laundry business, because of the tax benefits you get from
explain.
it.
Yeah, that's a little bit more.
Yeah.
So what's the tax?
So the tax benefit is there's a code in the tax law, kind of like I'm sure you all have heard about when you buy a SUV that's 6,000 pounds or more, you can deduct the whole SUV year 1, right?
I heard that on TikTok. I didn't know if that was real.
It is a real deal, and
Really?
it's the same type of thing that applies to this. So with the equipment in the laundromat, you can write off. If you're buying an existing laundromat, you just have to structure your contract correctly to basically allocate a certain amount. So if you're buying, I'm just going to throw out random numbers. If you're buying $1 million laundromat, right, how much of that is worth in equipment, right? So if it's $800,000 or $900,000, whatever you can agree upon on the sale of how much is actually equipment, y'all fill out a form. I don't know what form it is, F53 something, that goes to the IRS. But basically, y'all agree and say, hey, out of that $1 million, $800,000 is allocated towards the equipment, and $200,000 is just goodwill, right? Just repeat customers that are coming in. And so with that, whatever y'all allocate, you can deduct 100% bonus year 1 on the equipment. And so basically, if you've got a business that's flowing, a couple $1 million in cash, and you're going to have a high tax bill, you can then take off, that entire amount year 1. The second part is if you end up buying the building. So now I'm getting to it where I'm not only buying, existing laundromats, I'm starting up my, new laundromat. So I have to already purchase the equipment. So then at that point, you know what the purchase price is. Whatever the manufacturer charges you, that's what the purchase price is. That gets deducted year 1. And then number 2, if you're buying the real estate, you also get tax advantages from purchasing the real estate, right?
So what I love here is I think a lot of business owners, they really rely on their accountants and their CPA to give them tax advice. But one thing that I've noticed, there are a few very great exceptions, but it's a rare CPA that's going to go out of their way to inform you of creative options in your taxes. So what I love hearing here is like you found options, and you probably have a CPA doing it. Let's be honest, none of us want to do that. Those forms,
too much risk.
I wouldn't do it correctly. But you've built a business structure that you've got the cash flow over here, and you've got the U.S. tax codes, tax shelter area. It's legal. It's a great way to work your taxes.
And CPAs typically aren't there to help you save on taxes. They're typically there to make sure that you're filing correctly and that you or them are not going to get in trouble from the IRS. So like I work with ADKF here in town. They're probably one of the bigger firms in town. I think they've got, I don't know, like 55 CPAs on staff. And so when I brought this strategy to them, they looked over and they're like, oh yeah, you're right. So it wasn't something like, they're not proactively telling people about this. They probably weren't even thinking about it, right? Because typically CPAs are the ones that are just making sure stuff is getting filed correctly, right? So what I try to recommend to people who are in business is, have your CPA, that's fine. Don't rely on them for tax strategy. Hire a tax strategist, right? So there's a lot of tax strategists out there who are different from CPAs. They really don't, some of them will, be CPAs and file your taxes for you, but a lot of them are just, hey, meet with us once a quarter or, twice a year, and let's see what businesses you're in, what you're doing, and then we can give you different strategies that you can look at to save taxes. So typically, for a good entrepreneur who's making a lot of money, you probably do want to go two different routes, right? Have your CPA, that's fine, and they can give you some tips, but also go out and find you a good tax strategist who can help you strategize on how to save taxes, because there's a bunch of different ways out there.
Sweet.
That's a
Skylar,
key bit of advice, yeah.
We are up on your segment for sure, but if folks want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that? Your
you can follow me.
huge.
Yeah, Instagram's a good one. So any social media platform, it's all the same. It's @ and then Skylar B Moon. So my first name, Skylar B Moon.
Awesome.
Find me there.
I think you got over 280,000, followers, so you know what
Pretty
you're doing
much
over there.
nothing.
I
Anyway.
think that's a very valuable email that you just gave out, and for entrepreneurs looking to do what you're doing, it just takes one story that people hear and they're like, I could do that too, for them to get started on their journey. So I think that's really inspirational.
For me, what stands out with Skylar and capitalism at its finest, Skylar, is if I don't have the data on this, but 15-year-olds that move out on their own, the likelihood of them being successful as you versus the streets, drugs, alcohol, pretty impressive. So good for you. And, sharing your story could be inspiring to other people out there.
Yeah, that's the goal.
And it's not like you're doing anything real textbook savvy out of you're just doing pretty basic stuff. You listen to a guy probably maybe on TikTok on the personal coach regarding your regular CPAs and typical businesses. Now, I don't know about the laundromat anymore because, well, hell, now you have a restaurant. That may take care of all that for you. Yeah. But really nice story. I'm glad to be part of it.
That's what I've always said on different podcasts and different things I've been on is I'm just the most regular guy in the world who's, is out here trying to, one, make $1 for ourselves and then, help other entrepreneurs and help people that, are wanting to get into business and make more than just a 9 to 5 out of their lives.
It's a hustle, right? We've got
you don't need an MBA.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah,
That's the key to it.
Hustle.
Have a work ethic.
Speaking of hustle, next up on the show is Guillermo, the owner of Guillermo's restaurant here in San Antonio. Guillermo, welcome to the show.
I'm glad to be here.
So you run 2 restaurants now, right?
It's one Guillermo's, and I like to frame it as just an extension, as one big one, because mentally, if I put it as 2, it can be a little bit more challenging. So yes, they're 2. They're 1.5 miles away from each other. Really simple to get to. I'm able to take my electric bike and ride through the cool parts of San Antonio to get there. So. That's what we do. Guillermo's restaurant on Austin Street and Guillermo's on McCullough.
And you've been around for how long?
I opened up in 1995 and sat the downtown YMCA right after I graduated from college with an accounting degree. I've been in the business 40 years. Here I am. Sometimes I wish I would have started working in a doctor's office because I'd probably be a doctor. But no, I started washing dishes because some guy that knew my brother called me up and said, hey, we need a dishwasher. I was 12 years old, 1984, 83, and I was like throwing my football up, catching it to myself in the spring. And they said, we need a dishwasher at Windsor Park Mall. That's when the downtown wasn't like a great area. People were already moving out to the suburbs, and they were developing the suburbs with these great malls and these great stores and these great restaurants. So Windsor Park Mall, if anyone recalls that, was really a happening place.
Yeah, that's at Waltham, right?
Yeah.
And 35.
Rack Space is there now.
Yeah. I remember that when I went through the Air Force basic training back in 1988. I remember going to that mall. It was like, wow, this is
It was
nice.
a new area in the city, I guess in the 70s. New stores, new homes, new subdivisions, and going through the cycle, it looks like it's taking a dip. You can still see a lot of vacant buildings about there. But when I was there, it was great. It was fun. You know, it was at the expense of downtown. Now, as we're evolving, we're trying to get back into downtown because you just need to look at some simple pictures of downtown San Antonio in the 50s. I mean, I have to remind you guys, San Antonio was the largest city in Texas. And everything was downtown. And downtown was the mall, just packed with people walking all around.
I think it's easy to forget that San Antonio is 300 years old. I think about that when I'm driving around my neighborhood, which is like historic, and I'm like, whoa.
What's crazy is we see the Alamo downtown every time we go down there, but they actually fought a battle at that Alamo. It's crazy.
It's a crazy story, the Alamo, which raises a lot of questions on the story.
Yeah, we may not want to get into that.
We don't want to get into
I read that book. Oh.
But
what's this book? I got to get this book.
Oh, it's a great story.
If you want to be angry, you can read Forget the Alamo.
Yeah.
Forget the Alamo.
Yeah.
Well, even before
I can't watch
I
on
read that
Netflix.
book, when I was in college at UTSA in the 90s, there was this guy from Mexico. And I remember talking about the Alamo, and this still resonates with me. He goes, "That's your story." He goes, "Our story is completely different."
Oh, yeah.
And I was like,
Well,
goes,
what did he mean
Be ready
by
to
our?
root for
What
Mexico
was he-
the entire time and know that they don't win.
You know, you can ask some simple questions in terms of talking about human nature and valiantly heroes. You know, when you're in battle, man, shit changes. And you look at the story and Bowie and doing this wonderful thing. No, from the perspective of some Mexican historians, no, you had the Alamo defenders running out, striving to survive, not standing up in that battle as, you know, I think any one of us, if we're getting shot,
yeah, it's
we're gonna,
war.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
come on.
war. So that's just a touch of it. So
The unsexy history of San
it's
Antonio.
a beautiful
It's not
story, but
done by Warner Brothers. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
well,
I mean,
you know,
it's a real thing.
It creates allegiance. It creates
yeah.
pride. It may create pride to a Texan. Not all of us here are Texans, but nonetheless, I wanted to touch on the city of San Antonio. That is something to be proud of, that we are 300 years old. Because let's look at, real quick, what grows slow and how does it die? What grows fast and how does it die? An oak tree takes a long time to grow, but it lasts a long time. Some of these other organisms that grow real quick die real fast. And talking about climate change, if you look at our community, there's a good chance that we are the oldest, I think one of the oldest cities in Texas. There's a good chance we may be able to weather these storms. Let's look at Phoenix. Let's look at Las Vegas. Cities that grew fast. As humans, we've been around, 275,000 years, consciously intelligent for about 75,000 years. I don't know.
That's debatable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's when they claimed the conscious revolution came, when we started getting smarter.
Light
But
bulb, aliens.
were those guys living in Death Valley? Were they living in Phoenix? You know, was it not until we were able to reroute water, AC, that people decided to move in Las Vegas, Phoenix?
air
Well, and I think a
conditioning changed
great
the world.
example is Detroit. It rose really fast with the car industry, and it fell really fast as soon as the car industry got outsourced to different countries. And speaking of culture in San Antonio, but you've been here decades, and your restaurant specifically has been open for how many years now?
Oh, gosh, 28 years. I've been in business 28 years, yeah.
I mean, a business that's 5 years old is a rare thing, and a restaurant that's 28 years
And
old.
it still doesn't get any easier. What the heck?
Well, you need to leverage, right? We got to figure out how to leverage. How do you?
Well,
I don't even know how you
restaurants are
leverage
hard.
in a restaurant business. Is it even possible?
You leverage. What do you mean by leverage?
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
I mean,
You do it, right? How did you leverage?
I mean, so again, I've been pretty good at putting systems and processes in place. So kind of look at, you know, the hierarchy and who the people are, and just making sure you have the right people in place, right? If you've got the best GM who's been, you know, doing this for, you know, X amount of years and has turned, you know, so many restaurants around, that's probably a guy that you want on your team.
So you have
right?
to
So
empower
making sure-
others to actually run that business,
Well, and
but
the
then you have
hard
to trust
part,
them.
Yeah.
too, I would
absolutely.
imagine, is Guillermo's is a neighborhood staple. It is a San Antonio staple at this point. So what's been the shift from 28 years ago? You started your restaurant. You were bright-eyed and bushy-tailed to where you are now. You've weathered COVID. You're dealing with a lot of different things going on.
Gosh, where can we start? So you guys may use leverage.
You got 5 minutes.
I use organization. And I've said this before, and this is some advice I give to a few people. With organization, you can accomplish anything. If not, there's chaos, right? And we all look to organization, right? We all look to the hospitals. We all call the police if we need help. And they're all in some form structured or an organization. You create that, and you're going to have employees because not everybody can create it. So they seek it. So I understand that responsibility. And then in terms of staff members, yeah, you have to treat them well, right? You have to recognize that they want to do well. You have to recognize that you have to believe them. You have to trust them. And that's always a topic of debate, but especially when we're talking about the media, people aren't trusting. I'll simply put it this way. When we go to H-E-B, are the security guards pointing guns at us to make sure we pay for that item, especially when we go to self-checkout? They trust us. Does that mean they don't know people steal? Sure they do. But for the most part, they trust us. When you come to our restaurant, right, and we feed grandmothers, children, mothers, fathers, they trust us. We take that seriously. So that begs a question across the board. Why not trust a journalist? Aren't they just like us? That they want to do a good thing? That they have a responsibility to journalists, their code is the journalist creed, to have some integrity.
Well, the good ones, right?
Yeah, the good ones, yeah, for the most part. I mean, regarding, I do the 80-20% rule, man. If 80% are running this way and 20% are running that way, your odds are run with the 80%. Doesn't mean it's going to lead you to safety, but the odds are really good. So if 80% of the media, and I pay for my media, by the way, and that's what I recommend everyone, pay for your media, because then you know a different machine is driving it. I'll go that way, right? I go to a restaurant. I simply ask, what's the best thing on the menu? What do most people order? Well, they order this. That's what I'll take. The odds are good. I'm going to like it.
That's where their margin's at, right? In the restaurant.
Yeah.
Margin's on the special.
Well, yeah. Well, but anyway, so I kind of went off a little bit. But yes, regarding people, yeah, you have to treat them good. And stress is stress. We may, Skylar and myself and Marc and Heather may like to believe that in our head, our stress level is beyond anyone else's because we're the CEO, we're the president. Hogwash. You look at simple primates, right? Look at monkeys, right? You have the hierarchy scale. And who are the ones who have the most stress? The ones on the bottom who keep getting their ass beat.
Well,
right?
I found that the longer I'm in business, the more I really reinforce the idea that the more I stress, it doesn't get any easier. I used to feel like if I was stressed, it meant I was doing enough, and it turns out it just made my life a lot harder. So now it's what can I do? But I could feel stressed out about it, or I could just do it, and the difficulty will probably be the same, but the stress is not going to help.
You got to find that sweet spot.
Stress is stress. So one thing that one of the studies I've read is that they find that the CEOs and the presidents typically have a lot less stress in some regards. So then the question is why?
The systems and processes.
Well, guess what? I can go work out when I want. I can go eat when I want. I can read a book. I can start surfing the internet when I want. Right? Yeah, we still have our challenges, but the middle managers, they've got to they have to deal with these parameters and these scales. So one of the things we do in our business is we let our staff be in control of their schedule. If they want to take off, you are more than welcome to take off. Just find someone to cover you. We put it on them. Again, with our staff, one of the more important things that we have with our staff is going back to structure, is the routine of things. And the conversations we'll have in my office are trying to synchronize, and I hope this resonates with our listeners and with us. I try to synchronize your unconscious with your conscious. And when you can synchronize those two, God damn, it's so easy. I can listen to my AirPods and cut that pizza because the pizza cutter is already there. It's like putting the seatbelt on when you get in your car. Yeah. You don't have to think about it. It's that time we're driving home, but we're thinking about Mary Lou, and hey, why am I driving to work?
Yeah.
Your unconscious is guiding you to work, right? You're not driving to the murderer's house.
Well, I think that's something interesting to note about like people in an entrepreneurial role where you do have to personally grow. You have to take those steps to always be expanding your knowledge base, learning new things. The job requires it, the job of being a business owner. And so that may be that difference. It's those atomic habits. It's the slight edge. It's leaders are readers. You're reading things. You're learning things. You have that flexibility and the knowledge that there's opportunity out there to go get. You just have to figure out how to know what you don't know yet. And so that's what's interesting. And we probably did ourselves a disservice scheduling you guys on the same episode.
Well,
it's a responsibility.
There's so much
as well.
to talk about.
Well, one of my goals is to actually do deeper dives. We'll just have one guest and we can kind of go farther because, I mean, 30 minutes goes by really, really fast, and we're actually over a little bit. But we do need to wrap up. Guillermo, it's a great conversation. You are a thinker, right? You go past the surface. You like to go deeper, and I like that. And Skylar, you're really, really good at, approaching things in a way that makes sense from a common sense perspective and just getting after it. Plus, you've got a lot of energy. How old are you now?
32.
32, yeah. Dude. You got so much life.
Starting.
Yeah, right. All right, as we wrap up, Guillermo, so if folks want to go to your restaurant, where's it and how do they you're on Yelp and all the things, right?
www.guillermosdowntown.com. Just go to the internet, type in Guillermo San Antonio, and something's bound to pop up.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? Don't read the reviews.
Don't read.
And don't read my responses.
Well, you've over
love when an owner
2,700 of them at
responds.
4.4 on Google. That's pretty good. So,
No.
I mean,
a restaurant that has a 5-star review, I'm suspicious. There's no one that's always happy with a restaurant. No one.
Well, 80-20, right? Siemens, Sapiens, we're
there you go.
right
That's
there,
4
man.
stars. It's not bad.
Yeah.
All right.
So, there we go.
All right, as we wrap up the show, a quick reminder, check out our latest podcast or catch video versions of the show anytime by visiting our website at satalkradio.com. That's going to be it for us. You guys have a great week. We'll see you on the
Thanks
next
for
one.
having us.
Thanks, guys. Great job.